He gave his seat to an alien elder with back pain, only to be greeted by an elite squadron at... Eric Jensen rolled his shoulders, trying to work out the knots that had formed during his 18-month stint on Proxima Colony. The massive interstellar liner hummed around him, its corridors packed with beings from a dozen worlds heading back to the central systems. His gray-green protective suit, standard issue for colonial advisors, felt stiff after so many months of constant wear, though he had to admit it did flatter his athletic build. "Final boarding call for premium passengers," announced the overhead system in 6 different languages. "Please proceed to your designated seating areas." Eric glanced at his ticket. First class, courtesy of the Colonial Administration, as thanks for his work establishing the new mining outpost. The perks of being one of humanity's top geological engineers. He smiled, anticipating the comfortable journey home. As he approached the first-class entrance, he noticed an elderly alien struggling to stand in the economy line. The being's violet skin was deeply wrinkled, and pain was etched across features that, while alien, clearly expressed suffering. The elder wore a high-collared brownish coat that had seen better days, though it retained a certain dignified quality. "Excuse me," Eric said, approaching the alien. "Are you all right?" The elder's 4-pupiled eyes blinked slowly. "Just an old back that doesn't appreciate long journeys," he replied in perfect English, his voice surprisingly melodious, despite his obvious discomfort. "Nothing to concern yourself with, human." Eric glanced at his premium ticket, then at the hard, cramped seats in economy class. The decision took less than a second. "Sir, would you like to trade seats with me? I have a first-class ticket. The seats recline fully and have built-in massage functions." The alien's eyes widened in surprise. "You would give up your comfort for a stranger? A non-human stranger at that?" Eric shrugged. "You need it more than I do. I've slept on rock formations for months. A regular seat won't kill me." For a moment, the elder seemed speechless. Then, with a slight bow of his head, he accepted. "I am Thalaron, and you are most kind, human. Eric Jensen." He handed over his ticket and took the elder's economy pass. "Enjoy the ride." The flight attendant, a slender humanoid with iridescent skin, witnessed the exchange with raised eyebrows but processed the swap without comment. As Eric settled into the cramped economy seat, wedged between a snoring Mercurian trader and a nervous-looking Venusian diplomat, he couldn't help but smile. The look of relief on Thalaron's face had been worth it. The journey passed slowly. Eric dozed fitfully, read reports on his datapad, and occasionally stretched his legs in the narrow aisle. During one such walk, he encountered Thalaron in the refreshment area. "Ah, my benefactor," the elder said warmly. "I must thank you again. My old spine hasn't felt this good in decades." "Happy to help," Eric replied, pouring himself a cup of synthetic coffee. "Tell me, what brings you from the colonies?" Thalaron asked. "Just finished setting up a new mining operation on Proxima Colony. 18 months of soil samples, core drilling, and arguing with administrators about safety protocols." "Admirable work," Thalaron nodded. "Resources are the lifeblood of civilization, but only when extracted responsibly." Something in the way he spoke made Eric pay closer attention. "You sound like you know something about it." "I've studied many things in my long life," Thalaron replied with a modest gesture, "including the delicate balance between progress and preservation." They continued talking as the ship cruised through hyperspace. Eric learned that Thalaron had been a professor of comparative political systems at the Galactic University on Centauri Prime, and had written extensively on interspecies relations. The more they spoke, the more Eric realized he was conversing with one of the most insightful minds he'd encountered in years. "The problem with human expansion," Thalaron was saying, "is not your ambition, which is admirable, but your impatience. You've accomplished in a century what took my people a millennium." "Is that a criticism or a compliment?" Eric asked with a half-smile. "Both, perhaps. Your species fascinates me. So young, yet so determined. So capable of both tremendous kindness and frightening aggression." The ship's announcement system interrupted them. "Preparing for arrival at Terran Central Station. All passengers, please return to your seats for deceleration." As they parted ways, Thalaron placed a 4-fingered hand on Eric's shoulder. "I shall not forget your kindness, Eric Jensen." Hours later, as the massive ship docked at the sprawling space station orbiting Earth, Eric gathered his minimal luggage and joined the disembarking passengers. He spotted Thalaron at the exit ramp, moving slowly despite the comfort of first class. "Allow me," Eric said, offering his arm for support. "Most kind," Thalaron accepted gratefully. They had barely stepped off the ramp when a formation of stern-faced aliens in gleaming armor blocked their path. Their skin was the same violet hue as Thalaron's, but they wore expressions of rigid discipline. The crowd around them fell silent. "Damn," Eric muttered. "Did I break some interstellar protocol by helping you?" Before Thalaron could answer, the formation of guards parted, revealing a striking figure. A humanoid woman with turquoise skin and luminous golden eyes strode forward, her silver-blue suit accentuating a slender yet powerful physique. Her presence commanded attention from everyone in the arrival hall. She moved directly toward them, and Eric tensed, preparing for trouble. Instead, her face broke into a radiant smile as she rushed to Thalaron. "Grandfather," she exclaimed, embracing the elder tenderly. "Thank the stars you've arrived safely." She turned to Eric, those golden eyes studying him with intense curiosity. "And you must be the human who gave up his seat. Grandfather has already sent word of your kindness." "It was nothing," Eric said, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyone would have done the same." Her smile widened. "I assure you they would not. I am Luzara, Royal Science Advisor to the Thalassian Confederation, and you have aided not just any elder, but the former High Chancellor and my beloved grandfather." Eric blinked in surprise. "I had no idea." "Which makes your gesture all the more meaningful," she replied. "The High Chancellor traveled incognito to avoid precisely this kind of reception." She gestured at the guards. "But I insisted on meeting him personally." Thalaron chuckled. "My granddaughter worries too much." "With good reason," Luzara responded, before turning back to Eric. "We are hosting a diplomatic reception tomorrow evening. Would you do us the honor of attending as our special guest?" Before Eric could respond, Thalaron added, "I would very much like to continue our conversation in more comfortable surroundings." Looking between the elder statesman and his captivating granddaughter, Eric found himself nodding. "I'd be honored." "Excellent," Luzara said, her golden eyes lingering on his. "Until tomorrow, then." As they departed, surrounded by their security detail, Eric stood watching them go, wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into with one simple act of kindness. The Thalassian embassy occupied an entire level of the interstellar diplomatic tower, its architecture blending smooth curves with sharp angles in a way that somehow evoked both water and crystal without using either. Eric adjusted his formal attire, a midnight blue suit that the embassy had delivered to his apartment that morning, along with a handwritten note from Luzara expressing her anticipation of his arrival. "Name and credentials?" asked a stern-faced Thalassian guard at the entrance. "Eric Jensen. I'm a guest of Science Advisor Lucera and former High Chancellor Thalaron." The guard's demeanor shifted instantly. "Ah, the human benefactor. You are expected, sir. Please follow me." Eric was led through a series of chambers where diplomats from dozens of worlds mingled. The lighting shifted subtly to accommodate the various visual spectrums of the attendees. Soft ambient music played from hidden sources, a harmonious blend of what sounded like underwater bells and wind instruments. "Eric Jensen!" Thalaron's melodious voice called out. The elder alien approached, moving with significantly more ease than he had on the ship. "I'm delighted you could join us." "I wouldn't miss it," Eric replied, accepting a glass of iridescent blue liquid from a passing server. "You're looking much better." "Our medical facilities here are excellent," Thalaron said with a gesture that Eric interpreted as the alien equivalent of a smile. "And I must say, you look quite distinguished in Thalassian formal wear." Before Eric could respond, a human man in the uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Security Corps approached them. "Mr. Jensen, a moment of your time, please." Thalaron nodded graciously. "Of course. I should greet the Arcturian ambassador anyway. We'll speak later, Eric." As the elder moved away, the security officer guided Eric to a quiet alcove. "Commander James Blackwood," he introduced himself, voice low. "I need to speak with you about your new friends." "Is there a problem?" Eric asked, instantly alert. "Potentially. We've been monitoring unusual activity within the Thalassian delegation, encrypted communications, unscheduled meetings with representatives from the Orion Syndicate." Blackwood's expression remained neutral. "We need someone on the inside." "And I just happened to fall into their laps," Eric concluded. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Just keep your eyes and ears open. Get close to the science advisor. She seems to have taken a particular interest in you. Report anything unusual." Eric frowned. "I'm not a spy, Commander." "No, you're a loyal citizen who's been given unprecedented access to a potentially volatile situation." Blackwood slipped a small device into Eric's hand. "If you notice anything concerning, press this twice. We'll extract you immediately." Before Eric could protest further, Blackwood melted back into the crowd, leaving him with an uncomfortable weight in his pocket and his thoughts. "There you are," came a melodious voice behind him. Eric turned to find Lusara approaching, her turquoise skin luminous against a flowing silver gown that caught the light with every movement. Her golden eyes studied him with undisguised interest. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." "Just taking in the sights," Eric replied, trying to push Blackwood's warning from his mind. "Your embassy is impressive." "Wait until you see our homeworld," she said, taking his arm with a familiarity that sent a surprising warmth through him. "The floating cities of Thalassia would leave even a well-traveled human like yourself speechless." "Is that an invitation?" The words slipped out before he could consider them. Her golden eyes sparkled. "It could be. Would you accept?" Something in her directness caught him off guard. Alien cultures often had different approaches to attraction, but the way Lusara looked at him transcended species barriers. There was no mistaking the interest in those golden eyes. "I might," he replied, matching her boldness, "depending on the company." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I would personally ensure you had the most thorough cultural experience possible." The double meaning hung in the air between them, electric and unmistakable. She guided him through the reception, introducing him to diplomats and officials from a dozen worlds. Throughout it all, her hand remained on his arm, her body occasionally brushing against his in ways that seemed both casual and deliberate. "Your grandfather mentioned a joint human-Thalassian project," Eric said as they paused near a window overlooking Earth's glittering nightscape. "Is that why I'm really here?" "Partially," she admitted. "Your work on responsible resource extraction aligns perfectly with a proposal I've been developing. But," she moved closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that's not the only reason I wanted to see you again." Eric was acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle scent that reminded him of ocean air after a storm. Blackwood's warning echoed in his mind, but it was increasingly difficult to focus on potential threats when faced with such immediate attraction. "And what would the other reasons be?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Humans fascinate me," she said, her fingers trailing lightly up his arm. "Your species' capacity for spontaneous kindness, for connection, it's not something we encounter often in the galaxy." "We're not that special," Eric countered. "You'd have done the same." "Would I?" Her golden eyes held his. "Thalassians are taught from childhood to calculate advantage, to weigh every action against potential benefit. You acted purely from compassion. It's refreshing." The conversation was interrupted by Thalaron approaching with several dignitaries. "Ah, there you are, Lusara. The Arcturian ambassador has questions about the cultural exchange program." Lusara sighed softly, her hand lingering on Eric's arm. "Duty calls, but our conversation isn't finished, Eric Jensen. In fact, I believe it's just beginning." As she moved away to join her grandfather, Eric found himself watching her go, torn between attraction and suspicion, between Blackwood's warnings and his own instincts. Whatever game was being played here, he was now firmly in the middle of it, caught between diplomatic currents and the undeniable pull of something that transcended political maneuvering. 3 days after the embassy reception, Eric found himself aboard the Thalassian research vessel Aquarius, bound for the contested planet Navara. The ship's observation deck offered a spectacular view of Earth receding behind them, the blue-green jewel growing smaller as they accelerated toward the jump point. "Admiring the view," Lusara's voice came from behind him. Eric turned to find her dressed in what appeared to be the Thalassian equivalent of casual attire, a flowing garment in the shades of deep blue that somehow managed to be both modest and alluring. "Just saying goodbye," he replied. "I wasn't expecting to leave Earth again so soon." Having second thoughts about joining our expedition? She moved beside him, close enough that he could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her turquoise skin. Not at all. A contested, resource-rich planet with multiple species vying for control? Sounds like my kind of vacation. Luzara laughed, the sound reminiscent of chimes in a gentle breeze. Your species' use of humor in tense situations continues to fascinate me. It's how we cope, Eric said. That, and an unreasonable belief that we can fix anything if we just try hard enough. Perhaps not so unreasonable. Her golden eyes studied him with that now familiar intensity. Your expertise in sustainable resource extraction is precisely what Novera needs. The competing claims from the Draconian Empire and the Arcturian Collective have brought us to the brink of interstellar conflict. And where do the Thalassians stand in all this? We're mediators, she explained, neutral parties with no territorial claims. Our interest is purely scientific and humanitarian. There was something in her tone that made Eric suspect there was more to the story. Before he could press further, the ship's lighting dimmed briefly, signaling their approach to the jump point. You should prepare yourself, Luzara said, placing a hand on his arm. The first jump can be disorienting for humans. I've done plenty of FTL jumps, Eric assured her. Not like this. Her fingers tightened slightly on his arm. Thalassian jump technology operates differently. It's more efficient, but affects different species in various ways. The ship's announcement system chimed softly. Jump sequence initiating in 30 seconds. All personnel, please secure yourselves. Luzara guided Eric to a reclined seat and took the one beside him. Close your eyes and focus on your breathing, she instructed. The sensation passes quickly. As the countdown reached 0, Eric felt a sudden pressure throughout his body, as if he were being simultaneously compressed and expanded. Colors he had no names for flashed behind his closed eyelids, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he felt as if his consciousness was being pulled apart into countless fragments. Then just as suddenly it was over. He gasped, opening his eyes to find Luzara watching him with concern. Are you all right? She asked, her hand cool against his forehead. That was intense, he managed, his voice hoarse. You handled it remarkably well, she said, sounding genuinely impressed. Most non-Thalassians experience severe nausea or temporary psychosis their first time. Lucky me, Eric muttered, slowly regaining his composure. Why does it affect different species differently? A shadow passed over Luzara's features. It has to do with our unique biology. The jump technology was designed for Thalassian physiology. Which is different from human physiology. How, exactly? Luzara hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Perhaps it's time I showed you. She stood, offering her hand. Come with me to my laboratory. There's something you should see. The laboratory occupied a significant portion of the ship's research deck. Various equipment hummed and pulsed, much of it unfamiliar to Eric despite his technical background. One wall was dominated by what appeared to be aquarium tanks filled with a luminescent fluid. Thalassians appear humanoid, Luzara began, activating a holographic display, but our biology is fundamentally different. The display showed a rotating image of what Eric assumed was Thalassian anatomy. We evolved from semi-aquatic ancestors. Our cellular structure contains properties more commonly found in certain marine organisms. Fascinating, Eric said, genuinely intrigued. But what does this have to do with the jump technology? Or why I'm really here? Luzara's golden eyes met his. In approximately 6 months, our system will pass through a radiation belt that occurs once every 3 centuries. For most species, it's merely a spectacular astronomical event. For Thalassians, it's potentially catastrophic. The radiation affects your unique cellular structure, Eric guessed. Yes, it disrupts our ability to maintain cellular cohesion. In simple terms, we begin to dissolve. Her voice remained clinical, but Eric could sense the underlying fear. Our scientists have been searching for a solution for decades. And you think humans hold the key somehow? Your species possesses remarkable genetic adaptability. Your cellular regeneration capabilities are unlike anything we've encountered. She stepped closer. When my grandfather returned and told me about your spontaneous kindness, I was intrigued. When I researched your background and discovered your expertise in resource management and geological engineering, I knew you were exactly what we needed. For the Novara project? That's part of it, she admitted, but also for our survival research. Novara contains rare minerals that our scientists believe could help create a protective treatment against the radiation. Your expertise could help us extract those resources without destroying the planet or triggering an interstellar war. Eric absorbed this information, suddenly understanding the weight behind Lusara's interest in him. Yet strangely, rather than feeling manipulated, he felt a deepening connection. Her vulnerability, her willingness to share her species' greatest fear, touched something in him. "Why tell me this now?" he asked softly. "Because I don't want secrets between us," she replied, her voice equally soft. She moved closer, her golden eyes holding his. "My initial interest in you may have been calculated, Eric, but what I feel now is anything but." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Eric found himself reaching for her, drawn by something that transcended species or mission objectives. Their lips met in a kiss that felt both alien and perfectly natural, her skin cool against his, her scent enveloping him like ocean mist. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Lusara whispered, "I've studied human customs extensively, but experiencing them firsthand is quite different." "Good different or bad different?" Eric asked, his arm still around her waist. "Definitely good," she replied with a smile that made his heart race. "Though I believe more research is required." As they moved toward each other again, the ship's alarm system suddenly blared to life. "Attention all personnel," came the captain's voice. "Unidentified vessels approaching. All crew to emergency stations. This is not a drill." Lusara's expression shifted from passion to concern in an instant. "We shouldn't have encountered anyone this far out," she said, already moving toward the communication panel. "Something's wrong." Eric followed, the moment broken, but the connection between them undeniably strengthened. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The bridge of the Aquarius was a model of controlled chaos as Eric and Lusara arrived. Thalassian crew members moved with practiced efficiency between holographic displays and control panels. At the center, Captain Nevin, a tall, stern-faced Thalassian with deep indigo skin, stood reviewing tactical projections. "Report," Lusara demanded, instantly shifting from the vulnerable woman of moments ago to the authoritative science advisor. "3 Draconian warships on intercept course," Captain Nevin replied, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "They're hailing us, demanding we drop out of FTL for inspection." Eric studied the tactical display. The Draconian vessels were arranged in a classic pincer formation designed to cut off escape routes. "They were waiting for us," he observed. "This isn't a random patrol." "Agreed," Lusara said grimly. "Open a channel, Captain." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a Draconian commander. Unlike the humanoid Thalassians, Draconians resembled Earth's ancient reptiles. Scaled skin, vertical pupils, and a prominent ridge of spines running from their heads down their backs. This particular specimen had scales the color of burnished copper and wore an elaborate uniform adorned with what appeared to be battle trophies. "I am Commander Varex of the Draconian Imperial Fleet," the alien announced, his voice a rumbling hiss. "Your vessel is trespassing in contested space. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Lusara stepped forward. "Commander, this is Science Advisor Lusara of the Thalassian Confederation. We're on a sanctioned research mission to Novara, approved by the Galactic Council. We have no hostile intent." "The Council's authority is not recognized in this sector," Varex replied dismissively. "Our intelligence suggests you carry weapons technology intended for deployment on Novara." "That's absurd," Lusara countered. "We're a research vessel." The Draconian's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "Then you won't object to an inspection. Comply within 5 minutes, or we will disable your engines and board by force." The transmission cut off abruptly. "Options?" Captain Nevin asked, turning to Lusara. "We can't outrun them," she said, studying the tactical display. "And if they board us, they'll discover our research into the radiation shield. The Draconians would use that knowledge as leverage against us." Eric stepped forward. "Let me speak to them." All eyes on the bridge turned to him. "With respect, Mr. Jensen," Captain Nevin said, "this is a delicate diplomatic situation?" "Exactly," Eric replied. "And right now, you need a wild card. The Draconians are expecting Thalassian diplomacy, Measured, calculated, predictable. They're not expecting a human perspective. Lucera studied him for a moment, then nodded. He's right. The Draconians respect strength and directness. Human diplomacy might throw them off balance. "What's your plan?" Captain Nevin asked skeptically. "I'll request to come aboard their vessel as a neutral representative," Eric explained. "Draconians value face-to-face confrontation. They see it as honorable. Once there, I can assess their true intentions and maybe negotiate a compromise." "It's too dangerous," Lucera protested. "If they discover you're working with us..." "Then I'll explain that I'm not," Eric countered. "I'm a human geological expert headed to Novara to assess its resources for potential Earth interests. That's not even a lie." Captain Nevin and Lucera exchanged glances. "It could work," the captain admitted reluctantly. "We have 3 minutes before they expect an answer," Lucera said. She pulled Eric aside, lowering her voice. "This is unnecessarily risky. We could attempt to outmaneuver them." "And start an interstellar incident?" Eric shook his head. "Trust me, Lucera. Sometimes the direct approach is best." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Concern, yes, but also a deepening trust. "Very well," she conceded, "but you'll wear a subdermal tracker. If anything goes wrong, you'll know exactly where to find me," he finished with a reassuring smile. 20 minutes later, Eric found himself aboard a Thalassian shuttle approaching the largest Draconian warship. The vessel was all sharp angles and protruding weapon arrays, its hull a dark metallic red that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the distant starlight. As the shuttle docked, Lucera's voice came through his earpiece. "Remember, Draconians respect strength but punish perceived weakness. Don't back down, but don't challenge their authority directly." "Got it," Eric replied softly. Confident but not cocky. "And Eric," her voice softened, "be careful." The shuttle door hissed open, revealing 2 towering Draconian guards. Their armor was adorned with what appeared to be actual bone fragments, trophies from previous conflicts, Eric assumed. "Follow," one guard commanded in rough standard. Eric was led through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Low lighting, exposed weapon systems, and walls decorated with what he strongly suspected were actual battle trophies. The air was uncomfortably warm and carried a musky scent that reminded him of Earth's desert regions. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a command center. Commander Varric stood on a raised platform, surrounded by subordinates operating various control stations. "The human emissary," announced one of the guards. Varric turned, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied Eric. "Curious. I expected Thalassian negotiators, not a human." "I'm not a negotiator," Eric replied evenly. "I'm a geological engineer en route to Novara to assess its resource potential for Earth interests. The Thalassians are merely providing transport as part of our mutual scientific exchange program. Earth has no sanctioned presence on Novara," Varric said, circling Eric slowly. "The planet falls under Draconian protection." "According to whom?" Eric asked, maintaining eye contact despite the commander's intimidating presence. "The Galactic Council recognizes Novara as neutral territory, pending resource assessment." "The Council is weak," Varric hissed. "They would divide the galaxy's riches among undeserving species." "Perhaps," Eric conceded, remembering Lucera's advice about not directly challenging their authority. "But they also prevent unnecessary conflicts. Surely the Empire doesn't want war over a single planet?" Varric made a sound that might have been laughter. "You speak boldly for someone surrounded by Draconian warriors." "I speak truthfully," Eric countered. "That's the human way." Something shifted in Varric's demeanor, a subtle change in posture, a slight tilting of his head. "Humans," he said almost thoughtfully. "Your species is young, yet you've expanded rapidly. Some in the Empire consider you a potential threat." "We prefer to think of ourselves as potential allies," Eric replied. "We have no quarrel with the Draconian Empire." "Yet you ally yourselves with the Thalassians?" "We ally ourselves with knowledge and progress," Eric corrected. "The mission to Novara benefits all species, including Draconians. The planet's resources could advance medical technology throughout the galaxy." Varric studied him for a long moment, then abruptly turned away. "You will remain here while we verify your claims. If you've spoken falsely, you will not leave this ship alive." As the commander stalked away, Eric maintained his composed exterior while inwardly calculating his options. The diplomatic gambit had bought them time, but he was now effectively a hostage. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, Luzara and the Aquarius were waiting, their fate tied to his success or failure. Eric had been confined to sparse quarters for several hours when the door finally hissed open. Commander Varex entered, flanked by 2 guards whose ceremonial armor suggested something more formal than a simple prisoner transfer. "Your claims have been partially verified," Varex announced, studying Eric with those unnerving vertical pupils. "The Thalassian vessel indeed carries no weapons technology that our scanners can detect." "As I told you," Eric replied evenly. "However," Varex continued, "our intelligence remains convinced that this mission to Navarra has ulterior motives. The Thalassians do not engage in purely altruistic ventures." Eric maintained a neutral expression. "What happens now?" The Draconian commander's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "I propose a solution that honors our traditions while respecting diplomatic protocols. The Keth Vrak." "I'm not familiar with the term." "The trial of worthiness," Varex explained, "an ancient Draconian custom. When 2 parties dispute territory or resources, a champion may undergo the trial to prove their claim's merit." Eric felt a chill despite the ship's oppressive heat. "And what does this trial involve?" "A series of challenges testing strength, endurance, and cunning." Varex's eyes gleamed. "If you succeed, we will allow the Thalassian vessel to proceed to Navarra unhindered. If you fail," he left the consequence unspoken. "And if I refuse, then we have no choice but to board the Thalassian vessel for a more thorough inspection, one they are unlikely to survive." The threat was clear. Eric thought of Lusara, of the Aquarius waiting in the void, of the Thalassian people facing extinction from the approaching radiation belt. "I accept," he said firmly. Varex seemed momentarily surprised, then pleased. "Excellent. Few non-Draconians have ever volunteered for the Kethvrak. Fewer still have survived it." "I'm not most non-Draconians," Eric replied. "I'm human." "So you are," Varex acknowledged with what almost seemed like respect. "Prepare yourself. The trial begins in 1 hour." After the commander departed, Eric was permitted to contact the Aquarius. Luzara's face appeared on the small view screen, concern evident in her golden eyes. "Eric, are you all right? We've been monitoring communications, but..." "I'm fine," he assured her, "but there's been a complication. The Draconians are insisting on something called the Kethvrak." Her expression shifted to alarm. "The trial of worthiness? Eric, you can't possibly..." "I already accepted." "That's madness. The Kethvrak was designed for Draconian physiology. Their strength, their heat tolerance, you'll be at a severe disadvantage." "Maybe," Eric conceded, "but it's our only option. If I refuse, they'll board the Aquarius and discover everything." Lusara's face softened. "There must be another way. Sometimes the direct approach is best, remember?" He tried to sound more confident than he felt. "Besides, humans are more adaptable than you might think. It's kind of our specialty." She was quiet for a moment. "The Kethvrak typically has 3 stages. The first tests physical strength, the second tests endurance against environmental extremes, and the third tests strategic thinking under pressure. Any advice?" "Draconians respect determination above all else. Even if you're outmatched, never show weakness." Her voice lowered. "And Eric, come back to me." The simple statement carried a weight that made his heart beat faster. "Count on it." The transmission ended, and Eric spent the remaining time mentally preparing himself. His years working on harsh colony worlds had toughened him physically, but he harbored no illusions about matching Draconian strength. He would need to be clever, to use human adaptability to his advantage. When the guards came for him, they led him to a vast chamber deep within the ship. The space was circular, with tiered seating surrounding a central arena. Dozens of Draconians filled the seats, their scales glinting in the reddish light. The air was even hotter here, nearly stifling. Varex stood in the center of the arena. Beside him was a Draconian warrior, at least a head taller than the commander, with jet-black scales and arms corded with muscle. "The human accepts the Kethvrak," Varex announced to the assembled crowd. "His opponent for the first trial is Krell, champion of the Imperial Guard." The massive draconian warrior stepped forward, eyeing Eric with obvious disdain. The first trial is simple, Varix explained, a test of strength and combat skill. Victory is achieved when one opponent can no longer continue or surrenders. Eric removed his jacket, acutely aware of how his human physique must appear to the reptilian audience. While his years of fieldwork had built considerable strength, he looked positively fragile next to the towering Krell. "Begin!" Varix commanded, stepping back. Krell charged immediately, moving with surprising speed for his size. Eric barely dodged the first attack, rolling to the side as the draconian's fist struck the floor where he'd been standing, leaving a visible dent in the metal. The crowd roared its approval. Eric knew he couldn't match the alien's raw power. Instead, he needed to use the draconian's strength against him. As Krell charged again, Eric waited until the last possible moment before sidestepping, using his opponent's momentum to send him stumbling forward. The maneuver bought Eric seconds at most. Krell recovered quickly, his reptilian face contorted with rage. This time when he attacked, his movements were more controlled, forcing Eric into a defensive pattern of dodges and retreats. "The human runs!" someone shouted from the crowd. "Coward!" Eric ignored the taunt, focusing on studying his opponent's movements. Krell was powerful but predictable, favoring his right side and telegraphing his attacks with a slight tensing of his shoulder spines. When Krell next lunged, Eric was ready. Instead of retreating, he moved toward the draconian, ducking under the massive arm and delivering a precise strike to a point just below Krell's ribcage, a vulnerable spot in many reptilian species he'd encountered during his colonial work. The effect was immediate. Krell gasped, momentarily stunned. Eric pressed his advantage, targeting the same pressure point with two more rapid strikes before dancing away from the draconian's retaliatory swing. The crowd fell silent, surprised by the human's effectiveness. Krell recovered, but now moved more cautiously, respect replacing the earlier contempt in his eyes. The fight continued, with Eric using his superior agility and knowledge of xenobiology to counter the draconian's overwhelming strength. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Eric's muscles burned with fatigue, his reaction slowing. A glancing blow from Krell sent him sprawling across the arena floor, the taste of blood sharp in his mouth. The draconian crowd roared, sensing the end was near. As Krell approached for the final blow, Eric remembered Luzara's words. Draconians respect determination above all else. Never show weakness. Drawing on his last reserves of strength, Eric rose to his feet. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but his stance was steady, his gaze unwavering. "Is that all you've got?" he challenged, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet arena. Krell paused, surprised by the human's resilience. Then, remarkably, the draconian warrior did something unexpected. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and inclined his head slightly. "The human stands," Krell announced to the crowd. "He fights with honor and cunning. I acknowledge his worth." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Varix stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "The first trial is complete," the commander declared. "The human has earned the right to continue to the second trial." As Eric was led from the arena to recover before the next challenge, he caught whispers among the draconian spectators. They spoke not of his weakness, but of his unexpected resilience, his tactical approach, his refusal to surrender despite being outmatched. In his temporary quarters, a medical drone treated his injuries. Eric's body ached, but a sense of accomplishment tempered the pain. He had passed the first test, not by outmuscling his opponent, but by demonstrating the uniquely human combination of adaptability, tactical thinking, and sheer stubborn determination. One down, two to go, he thought, and somewhere out there, Luzara was waiting. The second trial tests endurance against environmental extremes, Varix announced several hours later. Eric stood at the entrance to what appeared to be an environmental simulation chamber. His body still ached from the combat trial, but the draconian medical technology had accelerated his healing considerably. Draconians evolved on a world with average temperatures humans would consider unbearable, Varix continued. This chamber reproduces the conditions of our ancestral breeding grounds, the volcanic plains of Dracos Prime. The door slid open, revealing a hellscape of red-hot rock and bubbling pools of what appeared to be molten sulfur. Heat billowed out in a suffocating wave. "Your task is simple," Varix said. "Reach the marker at the far side of the chamber." The environmental controls will gradually increase temperature and toxic gas levels as you progress. Eric studied the terrain. The chamber was perhaps 50 meters across, but the path was treacherous. Narrow stone bridges over bubbling pits, unstable-looking rock formations, and worst of all, no apparent protection from the heat. Most impressive, came a familiar voice. Eric turned to find Krell, his opponent from the first trial, observing with several other Draconian officers. Few non-Draconians would even attempt this challenge. How long do I have? Eric asked Varix. Until you succeed, fail, or surrender, the commander replied with that teeth-baring, not-quite smile. Eric nodded, then removed his outer shirt, leaving only a light undershirt. He tore the discarded garment into strips, soaking several in a nearby water dispenser and wrapping them around his head, neck, and wrists, places where blood vessels ran close to the skin. Primitive cooling technique, one Draconian officer observed dismissively. Effective, though, Krell countered, watching with interest. Eric approached the chamber entrance, feeling the scorching heat against his face. He thought of Luzara, of the Thalassians facing extinction, of the simple act of kindness on a transport ship that had led him here. Taking a deep breath of cool air, he stepped into the inferno. The heat hit him like a physical blow. Even with his improvised cooling measures, sweat instantly beaded on his skin. The air was thin and acrid, burning his lungs with each breath. One step at a time, he told himself, focusing on the immediate challenge rather than the daunting distance. The first section was relatively straightforward, a path of black volcanic rock surrounded by bubbling pools of sulfurous liquid. As he progressed, however, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Rocks that appeared solid crumbled under his weight. Pockets of toxic gas erupted without warning. Halfway across, the environmental controls increased as promised. The temperature jumped several degrees and the air grew thinner. Eric's vision blurred, his lungs straining. He re-wet his makeshift cooling wraps with his own sweat, the moisture evaporating almost instantly in the hellish heat. Through his discomfort, he noticed something: patterns in the chamber's design. The most stable paths were marked by subtle differences in the rock coloration. The gas eruptions were preceded by faint vibrations. The Draconian challenge wasn't just about withstanding heat, it was about observation and adaptation. Using these insights, Eric made faster progress, though each step required more effort than the last. His body was reaching its limits, but his mind remained sharp, calculating, observing. 3/4 of the way across, disaster struck. A section of path collapsed beneath him, plunging his right leg into a pool of scalding liquid. Pain lanced through him as he frantically pulled himself back onto solid ground, the skin of his calf blistering instantly. From the observation area, he heard murmurs. The Draconians expected him to surrender now. Perhaps any rational being would. But Eric Jensen wasn't just any being. He was human, a species that had survived ice ages and scorching deserts, that had climbed the highest mountains and plunged into the deepest oceans long before they had technology to protect them. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Eric fashioned a crude walking stick from debris and continued, limping but determined. Each step was agony, but he refused to stop, refused to show weakness. When he finally reached the marker, a simple pillar at the far side of the chamber, he placed his hand on it and allowed himself one moment of triumph before the darkness at the edges of his vision closed in. He awoke in the medical bay, the pain in his leg reduced to a dull throb. A Draconian medic was applying a regenerative compound to the burn. "The human awakens," the medic announced, stepping back. Varix approached, studying Eric with what might have been newfound respect. "You completed the second trial. Few non-Draconians have ever done so." "What's next?" Eric asked, his voice hoarse from the toxic air. "Rest. The final trial begins tomorrow." Varix paused. "Your Thalassian friend has requested to speak with you." A view screen activated, revealing Luzara's concerned face. "Eric, your vital signs were fluctuating wildly. Are you all right?" "I've been better," he admitted with a weak smile, "but I passed the second trial." "The environmental challenge?" Her golden eyes widened. "That's unprecedented for a human." "Just one more to go," Eric said. "The strategic trial, right?" "Yes, but it's not what you might expect," she warned. Draconian strategy isn't just about military tactics. It's about understanding your opponent's nature and exploiting it. Their conversation was cut short as Varix returned. Enough! The human needs rest before the final challenge. As the view screen went dark, Eric caught a glimpse of something unexpected. A growing crowd of Draconian officers behind Varix, watching him with curious eyes. Word of his performance had spread throughout the ship. The next morning, Eric was led to yet another chamber, this one filled with holographic displays and what appeared to be a three-dimensional tactical board. Varix waited alongside an older Draconian, whose scales had faded to a pale copper. "This is War Sage Thrax," Varix introduced. "He has never been defeated in Keth Vrak's strategic combat." The elderly Draconian inclined his head slightly. "I have studied your species, human. Your military history is chaotic, but fascinating." "The final trial is Keth Vrak Teth, strategic dominance," Varix explained. "You will command a simulated fleet against War Sage Thrax. Victory is achieved by either destroying your opponent's flagship or forcing surrender." Eric studied the tactical board. The simulation represented a complex star system with multiple planets, asteroid fields, and nebulae. His fleet, marked in blue, was positioned at one edge, while Thrax's red fleet waited at the opposite side. "Your forces are equivalent in firepower," Varix continued. "The difference will be in strategy alone." Eric nodded, taking position at the control interface. As he familiarized himself with the commands, he noticed something interesting. The Draconian tactical doctrine displayed in the system was rigidly hierarchical, with clear chains of command and predetermined formations. The simulation began. Thrax immediately deployed his forces in a classic pincer movement, attempting to surround Eric's fleet. It was textbook Draconian strategy, overwhelming force applied with precision. Instead of countering directly, Eric did something unexpected. He divided his fleet into smaller, more agile units and scattered them throughout the system, using planets and asteroid fields for cover. "The human flees," someone commented from the growing audience of officers. "No," Krell replied, watching intently. "He adapts." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Eric used his smaller units to harass Thrax's main force, striking quickly and retreating before the Draconians could bring their superior firepower to bear. He utilized the system's natural features, gravity wells, radiation belts, dense asteroid fields, to set traps and ambushes. Thrax was a brilliant tactician, adjusting his approach several times, but each time Eric changed tactics again, never allowing the War Sage to establish the set-piece battle Draconian doctrine favored. "Fascinating," Thrax commented after Eric's forces executed a particularly daring maneuver, using a gas giant's gravity to slingshot several ships behind Draconian lines. "You fight like no opponent I have faced." "Humans don't believe in fighting fair," Eric replied. "We believe in winning." The battle continued for hours, a complex dance of move and countermove. The audience of Draconian officers grew, many bringing recording devices to study the humans' unconventional tactics. Finally, Eric sprung his trap. Having gradually lured Thrax's forces into a nebula where sensors were compromised, he revealed his flagship, which had been disguised as a minor support vessel, directly behind the Draconian command ship. In the simulation, weapons locked on. "Checkmate," Eric said. Thrax studied the board for a long moment, then inclined his head. "I concede. Most impressive, human." A murmur ran through the assembled Draconians. Varix stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "The Keth Vrak is complete," he announced. "The human has prevailed in all three trials. As promised, the Thalassian vessel may proceed to Navarre unhindered." The assembled officers thumped their chest plates in a gesture of respect that required no translation. As Eric was escorted back to prepare for his return to the Aquarius, Krell fell into step beside him. "You have made quite an impression, human," the warrior said. "There is talk among the younger officers of establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth." "That would be a welcome development," Eric replied. "Humans and Draconians have more in common than either side might think." "Perhaps," Krell agreed. "Your species' adaptability is impressive. Some might even say threatening. Or valuable as an ally," Eric countered. Krell made that harsh laughing sound again. "Indeed. Safe journey, Eric Jensen. I suspect we will meet again. Hours later, as the shuttle carried him back to the Aquarius, Eric reflected on the unexpected diplomatic breakthrough. His mission had been to secure passage to Novara for the Thalassians, but he had accomplished something potentially far greater. The first steps toward an alliance between humans and one of the galaxy's most powerful species. As the Aquarius came into view, he thought of Luzara waiting aboard and smiled. Sometimes the most significant journeys began with the simplest acts of kindness, like giving up a comfortable seat to an elderly alien with back pain. 6 months later, Eric stood on the observation deck of the Thalassian capital city of Aquatica, watching as the radiation belt's shimmering curtain of energy passed harmlessly through the planet's atmosphere. The protective shield, developed from the minerals they had extracted from Novara, glowed with a subtle blue luminescence as it neutralized the harmful radiation. "It's beautiful in its way," Luzara said, joining him at the viewport. "Something that could have destroyed us, transformed into a spectacle." Eric smiled, taking her hand. Her turquoise skin contrasted pleasantly with his own as their fingers intertwined. "That's what I love about your people. You see the beauty even in potential disaster. And what I love about humans is how you transform disasters into opportunities." She leaned against him, her body fitting perfectly against his. "Without you, this would have been our extinction event." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of activity. After the successful extraction mission on Novara, Eric had helped establish a framework for cooperative resource sharing between Thalassians, humans, and, most surprisingly, Draconians. What had begun as a contested planet had become a model for interspecies cooperation, with each civilization contributing their unique strengths to the project. "Have you heard from Commander Varex?" Eric asked. Luzara nodded. "The Draconian delegation arrives tomorrow for the treaty signing. Apparently, he specifically requested you be present." "I'm honored," Eric replied, though in truth he was still getting used to his newfound diplomatic importance. "And Krell?" "Appointed as the first Draconian ambassador to Earth," Luzara said with a smile. "He sent a message saying he looks forward to challenging you to a rematch under less formal circumstances." Eric laughed. "I think I'll pass on that." They fell into comfortable silence, watching the cosmic light show. So much had changed since that fateful day on the transport ship, when he'd offered his seat to an elderly alien with back pain. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had cascaded into galaxy-changing events. His relationship with Luzara had deepened in ways he could never have imagined. Their initial attraction had blossomed into something profound, a connection that bridged not just their hearts but their civilizations. Their first night together had been a revelation, a beautiful discovery of how their different biologies could create something harmonious and transcendent. "Grandfather wants to see us before the ceremony," Luzara said, breaking the silence. "Lead the way," Eric replied. They made their way through the floating city's crystalline corridors. Aquatica was a marvel of engineering, a vast metropolis suspended above Thalassia's global ocean, its structures seeming to flow like water frozen in time. Thalaron awaited them in his private chambers, looking remarkably spry for someone who had appeared so frail on that transport ship. The elder Thalassian smiled warmly as they entered. "Ah, the architects of our salvation," he greeted them. "Come sit. We have matters to discuss before tomorrow's festivities." Once they were seated, Thalaron activated a holographic display showing the treaty document that would formalize the alliance between their three species. "The Galactic Council is calling it unprecedented," the elder said. "3 historically competitive civilizations agreeing to mutual cooperation and resource sharing. Many are saying it heralds a new era in interstellar relations." "It's a good start," Eric acknowledged, "but there's still work to be done." "Indeed," Thalaron agreed. "Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you both." He deactivated the hologram and leaned forward. "Eric, your actions have not only saved my people, but have created a diplomatic breakthrough that will benefit countless worlds. The Thalassian Confederation wishes to formally recognize your contribution." "That's not necessary," Eric began, but Thalaron raised a hand. "It is entirely necessary," the elder insisted. "Tomorrow, before the treaty signing, you will be named an honorary citizen of Thalassia, the first human to receive such recognition." Eric was momentarily speechless. Luzara squeezed his hand, her golden eyes shining with pride. "There's more," Thalaron continued. "The Confederation has approved the creation of a new diplomatic position. Interspecies Liaison Officer. We would like you to be the first to hold this title. I'm honored, Eric managed, but I'm not a diplomat by training. Thalaron chuckled. My dear boy, you negotiated peace with the Draconians and saved an entire civilization through resource cooperation. I'd say you're more qualified than most career diplomats. He's right, Luzara added softly. You have a gift for this, Eric. You see beyond species differences to find common ground. Eric considered the offer. His life had taken an unexpected turn since that simple act of kindness, but each new development felt right somehow, as if he were following a path that had always been waiting for him. I accept, he said finally, though I have one condition. Thalaron raised an eyebrow ridge. And that would be that the position allows me to split my time between Thalasia and Earth. I want to maintain my connection to humanity while building bridges between our worlds. The elder smiled. A wise stipulation. Agreed. After their meeting with Thalaron, Eric and Luzara strolled through Aquatica's botanical gardens, a stunning collection of aquatic flora from across the galaxy. The evening light filtered through the transparent dome above, casting everything in a golden glow. You've been quiet, Luzara observed, her fingers tracing patterns on his palm as they walked. Just thinking about how one small decision can change everything, Eric replied. If I hadn't given up my seat that day, perhaps the universe would have found another way to bring us together, she suggested. Or perhaps not. Either way, I'm grateful for your human compassion. They stopped beside a pool where luminescent plants swayed in gentle currents. Luzra turned to face him, her golden eyes serious. There's something I need to ask you, she said. Something important. Eric's heart quickened. I'm listening. In Thalasian culture, when we form a permanent bond with another, there's a ritual called the confluence. It's similar to what humans might call marriage, but with some differences. She took both his hands in hers. It would mean committing to each other across the span of stars, across the differences of our species. Are you proposing to me? Eric asked, a smile spreading across his face. I am, she confirmed, her turquoise skin flushing slightly darker. Though I understand if it's too soon, or if the differences between us. He silenced her with a kiss, drawing her close against him. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, he whispered, yes. 1,000 times, yes. The next day dawned clear and bright. The Grand Assembly Hall of Aquatica was filled to capacity with representatives from dozens of worlds, all gathered to witness the historic treaty signing. At the center of the hall stood 3 podiums, one for each signatory species. Eric, dressed in formal Thalasian attire modified to accommodate human physiology, stood beside Luzara as Thalaron addressed the assembly. Today marks not just the salvation of the Thalasian people from extinction, the elder statesman proclaimed, but the beginning of a new chapter in galactic cooperation. What began as a simple act of kindness between strangers has blossomed into an alliance that will benefit all our civilizations. As Thalaron spoke, Eric caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Commander Varax and a delegation of Draconian officials, including Krell, watched with solemn attention. Commander Blackwood represented Earth's diplomatic corps, alongside a contingent of human officials who had arrived for the treaty signing. Before we proceed with the treaty, Thalaron continued, the Thalasian Confederation wishes to recognize the human whose compassion and courage made this day possible. Eric was guided forward to stand before the assembly. Eric Jensen, Thalaron announced, for your service to our people and your instrumental role in forging this alliance, I hereby name you an honorary citizen of Thalasia and appoint you as the first interspecies liaison officer. A medallion was placed around Eric's neck, a beautiful piece crafted from Novaran minerals, symbolizing the connection between their worlds. As the applause died down, Eric stepped to the central podium. He hadn't planned to speak, but looking out at the assembled representatives of 3 great civilizations, words came naturally. 6 months ago, I gave up a comfortable seat because someone needed it more than I did, he began. It was a small gesture, one that any human might have made. I never imagined where it would lead. He glanced at Luzara, drawing strength from her encouraging smile. What I've learned since then is that the greatest strength of any species isn't technological advancement or military might. It's the capacity for compassion, for seeing beyond differences to recognize our shared needs and aspirations. Humans, Thalassians, Draconians, we're all travelers in the same vast cosmos, all seeking comfort, security, and connection. He looked directly at the Draconian delegation. Sometimes the journey requires strength and determination. His gaze shifted to the Thalassians. Sometimes it demands scientific innovation and diplomatic finesse. Finally, he turned to his fellow humans. And sometimes it simply asks us to offer our seat to someone in pain. The treaty signing proceeded with ceremonial gravity, each representative adding their mark to the historic document. When it was complete, cheers erupted throughout the hall, echoing off the crystalline walls. Later, at the celebration that followed, Eric found himself approached by Commander Varex. The Draconian officer seemed less intimidating in the festive setting, though no less imposing. Jensen, Varex greeted him with a slight inclination of his head. The Draconian Empire has authorized me to extend an invitation. We would be honored if you would visit our homeworld as part of your new diplomatic duties. I'd be delighted, Eric replied, genuinely surprised by the gesture. Your performance in the Kethvrak has become legendary among our younger warriors, Varex admitted. They speak of the human way, adaptability over rigid strength, innovation over tradition. I hope they remember I nearly died in your heat chamber, Eric said with a wry smile. Varex made that harsh laughing sound. That too is part of the legend. As the commander moved away, Luzara appeared at Eric's side, slipping her arm through his. Making more interstellar friends? Apparently I'm a legend on Draco's Prime now, he said with a chuckle. As you should be. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Hero of 3 worlds. I'm no hero, he protested. Just a guy who gave up his seat. And in doing so, found his place in the universe. She turned to face him, her golden eyes reflecting the celebration lights. Our place. As they stood together amid the diplomatic triumph they had helped create, Eric reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a cramped economy seat on a transport ship to the center of a historic alliance, from a chance meeting with an elderly alien to finding love across the stars. Sometimes the most profound journeys began with the smallest steps, with simple acts of kindness that rippled outward in ways no one could predict. And sometimes giving up your seat meant finding exactly where you belonged.